What are we discussing on today's Locked on Diamondbacks podcast? Who is the D-backs' biggest rival? And if you could steal an MLB free agent off each championship series team, who would it be?
You are Locked on Diamondbacks, your daily Arizona Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked on Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. You're listening to who? The always charismatic host of this podcast, Millard Thomas, a multimedia journalist, and I'm a graphic designer. So please go check out my website, millardthomas24.myportfolio.com. On there, you can see all my latest work, from my packages to my articles to my photos and my graphic design. Today's episode is brought to you by GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. On today's Locked on Diamondbacks podcast, we're talking about who is the D-backs' biggest rival in baseball. If you could steal one free agent off each championship series team, who would it be? And of course, as we've been doing every day this offseason, another player review. And today we're breaking down Corbin Carroll's 2024 season. So a whole lot I want to talk to you guys about today. But first, I want to say thank you for making Locked on Diamondbacks your first listen every day. I would not be able to do this podcast without you, my loyal listeners, sharing, subscribing, reviewing, doing all that so I could do this podcast for you. Thank you. It's free. It's available on all platforms. So please continue to tell your friends. And one of those platforms is YouTube. Please hit subscribe to Locked on Diamondbacks on YouTube. All right. Let's get back into the Locked on Diamondbacks podcast. And I want to answer a question that I saw proposed by AZ Snake Pit. Who is the D-backs' biggest rival? I thought this was a very interesting question because I don't think this one had an easy answer. I thought this was actually, when I thought about it more, it was actually a pretty layered and loaded question because I actually think there's a bunch of different directions you can go when answering the question of who is the D-backs' biggest rival. Because when just evaluating the D-backs franchise, they are younger than most franchises in Major League Baseball. This is a team that was conceived, I think, in the 97 season, right? This is still a team under 30 years of age. I was born in the 97 calendar year. So me and the D-backs are like the same age. So historically speaking, they don't have as much experience dealing with other teams, regular season, postseason, as, some of these other rivalries like the Yankees and Dodgers and the Cubs and whoever they face, right? When you think about these teams who have been around for 100+ years, the D-backs just don't have that kind of history like these other teams. They also don't have that level of success. I mean, I know they got 2 World Series appearances on their franchise resume, but still, overall, they still only have a handful of postseason appearances. So when talking about the overall success in the history of this franchise, it's not as long as some other teams. And so it's hard to start building that hatred that other teams might have toward you if you're not in the postseason every year, if you're not one of the best teams in Major League Baseball every single season, if you don't have this long history and track record like the New York Yankees or the LA Dodgers of being one of the best, it's going to be harder for other teams to hate you. You have more seasons like 2023 where you run through the best teams in the National League en route to going to the World Series. You're going to make some haters along the way. And right now, the D-backs don't have enough seasons like that. And so when asking the question of who is the D-backs' biggest rival, I think you have to take into account the D-backs' history, the lack thereof of overall success, and say who is on like the same playing field as the D-backs. And so when you ask the question like that, I think the answer is probably the Colorado Rockies. When looking at these two teams side by side, I think they are pretty equal on playing field over the last 20 years, historically speaking. Like both of these teams probably have the 2 best postseason, these two teams probably have the best postseason matchups of any team the D-backs face in the NL West. Like, yes, the D-backs have faced the Dodgers a ton in the postseason, but not exactly an even matchup there between the D-backs and Rockies. Definitely a lot more success on both sides for those two franchises. The Rockies beat the D-backs en route to their own World Series appearance back in the day. Both of those teams are franchise expansion teams as well, which is something that it's just nice in terms of the connective tissue. And also, when just looking ahead to MLB Rivalry Week in 2025, it's D-backs versus Rockies facing off. So just based off just based off the MLB definition, that is going to be the rivalry for next year. And I know MLB did it mostly off regional stuff because it's Mets, Yankees, it's Angels, Dodgers. I don't think anyone considers those, the main rivals of either of those big market franchises, but that's how it's played out right now. And so for the D-backs, yes, they're playing the Rockies during rivalry week, mostly because of regional and air travel and stuff like that, logistics. But historically speaking, you would also probably pick the Rockies to be considered the D-backs rival. I think they're probably the closest in terms of overall franchise standing over the last 20 years. So I think the Rockies would be the pick historically speaking, but going forward, I don't think the Rockies is the right answer because right now, the way the Rockies franchise is going, which is just rudderless, they bring back the same manager every year who does nothing. They don't know how to spend money. They don't know how to build that team. That Rockies franchise is going to be in the basement for a while. The San Francisco Giants team, I like a lot. I do think they could be a rival to the D-backs, but for some reason, they just don't know how to acquire any position player of merit, whether it's through the draft, through free agency, through trade. Like, they know how to put together a team that can outperform expectations. They know how to acquire good pitching players and good pitchers overall. I'm never concerned about their pitchers. I always think the Giants are going to be better than maybe the expectations I have for them, but their lineup is never that competitive. And then the Dodgers are just on their own level, right? With the money that they could spend, with the talent that they have, with their overall history of success against the D-backs, and the fact that the Dodgers and Giants are also the biggest rivalry in the NL West, it's hard to say either of those two teams going forward could be the D-backs rival because going forward, I just don't think the Giants are going to be good enough, and they have the Dodgers. Meanwhile, the Dodgers are just operating in a different stratosphere as the D-backs, and they would choose the Giants as their most hated rival. That's why I think the Padres going forward and the D-backs should have the most heated rivalry in the NL West because on paper, I think the talent matches up perfectly from the lineup to the rotation. I think those are two very evenly position teams in terms of talent. And also, I just think they're going to be vying for like the same spot, which is like number 2 in the NL West, could steal the division if they want. But like we saw in the second half of the season, I think those two teams are just going to be neck and neck with each other for the next few seasons. I think they kind of have the same trajectory over the next few years. It's just going to be on each other's corner for the next few seasons. So I think the rivalry that I'm really interested in watching develop organically in the NL West is the D-backs versus San Diego Padres, because I think we're going to see some postseason matchups against those two teams in the wild card round. I think we're going to see those two teams battle for the wild card spots and potentially knock each other out of the postseason mix like we saw this past season. So I think going forward, it will be the D-backs versus Padres as the biggest rivalry. So when I said you could answer this question so many different ways, this is what I'm talking about. Historically speaking, it's the Rockies. Going into the future, I think it's the Padres. But if we're all being honest, the one team that we all truly hate is the LA Dodgers. And so as much as we want to make the Padres the rival, as much as we feel like in terms of being on the same footing, the Rockies are a rival, the team that we hate the most is the LA Dodgers. And if we're all being honest with each other in the NL West, it's truly 4 teams that hate the Dodgers and then the Dodgers just minding their own business. It's really the NL West versus the Dodgers. That is the true rivalry. Everyone in the division trying to take out LA, which is the true rivalry. I think at the end of the day, I think at the end of the day, Giants, Padres, Rockies, and Dbacks don't even really care about each other. I think we all just care about beating the Dodgers. If the Dodgers were not in the NOS, I think those four teams would actually be pretty good friends. And so, who is the D-backs' biggest rival? It depends on the day. It depends who you ask. Historically, it's the Rockies. In the future, I think it's going to be the Padres. But in our heart of hearts, we all know it's the LA Dodgers. And now I want to ask you guys, if you could steal a free agent off any championship series team, who would it be? We'll answer that in segment number 2. And if you want to place a wager down on an upcoming baseball game or NFL game, then check out FanDuel because, hey, NFL fans, you can start this season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. My favorite thing to do on FanDuel is the same game parlay. Give me Saints money line, give me Spencer Rattler over on total TDs, and give me Kamara over on rushing yards. When that 3-leg hits, it brings a big smile to my face. If you want a big smile on your face, just place your first $5 bet and you'll get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right. Let's get back to the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast, and let's do a fun little game that I thought of when trying to come up with podcast ideas, because of course it's the off season, so sometimes it's a little tough to come up with podcast ideas, but it's too early in the off season to be stuck already because, guys, the playoffs are still going on. So if we're already if we're already stuck with off-season topics, it's going to be a long off-season. But thankfully, we are not there yet because I had a great idea for you guys today. How about we play a little game of let's steal a free agent off every championship series team. And this is not a game where you can just take any player because, of course, it would be easy to be like, oh, give me Ohtani from the Dodgers. Give me Aaron Judge from the Yankees. Like, no, that's not how the game is going to be played. This is a game where you have to sign a free agent, one free agent off each team. And these are actual free agents for these teams that are going to be upcoming in 2025. Realistic targets that the D-backs could potentially add to their roster. And so let's start with the LA Dodgers because they actually do have a few interesting names of guys who are going to be free agents this offseason that could help out the Arizona Diamondbacks. At the more expensive end, you could look at Teoscar Hernandez, who had a very good season with the LA Dodgers. We could be losing Jock Peterson and Randall Grichuk if we want to add a big power bat to our team that could really help out our offense and, make us #1 run scored once again. Teoscar Hernandez could help the D-backs out a lot. 30 plus home runs, 99 ribbies, 800 plus OPS, had a great season for LA. But I think I would rather go in the pitching department when looking at this Dodgers roster. Yes, Teoscar is nice, but Jack Flaherty, he's going to be a free agent. He had himself a very nice year between Detroit in LA. I think he could be a pretty interesting fella. Already been in the NOS, been in big games, could be an interesting target to go out there and get. Walker Buehler, who is having himself not the greatest season, coming off the injuries that he's dealt with the last 2 years. But if you're talking about high risk, high reward, taking a dart throw on Walker Buehler, who could end up just not being good again, or could end up being a superstar pitcher once again, because Walker Buehler, when he was right pre-injury, was one of the best pitchers in Major League Baseball. So if you could rediscover that fella, that is a game changer in your rotation with a Gallen, a Kelly, and a Fott. Or go with one of the relievers and a Blake Trinian, a Joe Kelly. There's some other interesting names. You could go Kershaw. No, I don't think anyone wants Kershaw. Kike? No, I don't think anyone wants Kike. So if I had to choose, I think Teoscar is nice. Flaherty be a good rotation piece, but I think we're good there. Same with Walker Buehler. To be honest, it's not the most fun or sexy answer, but the D-backs bullpen, especially that back end, needs help. Blake Trinian is a guy with double-digit strikeouts. This is a guy Yes, he's a little bit older, but a certified stud in the back end of your bullpen. And if you could add him into the mix that the D-backs already have with the Martinezes and the Pucks and the Ginkles and the Thompsons, Trinian could be really nice for Arizona. So he would be the one free agent that I would like to steal from the Dodgers. How about the New York Mets? They are another interesting team. We could bring back former friend of the D-backs who crushed it for us in a half season, JD Martinez, to replace the DHs that we're probably going to lose this offseason. They also have some interesting relievers in the Ryan Staneks and Ottavinos, Phil Mayton, right? They got so many relievers, but I just stole a reliever of Blake Trinian from the LA Dodgers. They do have interesting rotation pieces in the Sean Manayas and the Severinos who've had breakout seasons this year for the New York Mets. But once again, I feel like the rotation, yes, it was shaky this year, but I'm just going to believe in the bounce back. I don't know if I believe in Sean Manaea enough to give him a job over Erod or Jordan Montgomery. Same with Luis Severino. And so I'm going to do something kind of wild here. D-backs first baseman is a free agent, right? He is going to have an expensive price tag. Not sure if Christian Walker is going to come back next year. Well, why not do a little trade with the New York Mets? Their free agent, or their first baseman, is also a free agent, Pete Alonso. This season, Christian Walker was better than Pete Alonso, but historically, over the last few years, Pete Alonso is better than Christian Walker. So D-backs add 40 home run, 100 RBI, Pete Alonso to their lineup. So now we have Blake Trinian from the Dodgers and Pete Alonso from the New York Mets. Let's move on to the Cleveland Guardians, who don't have as many interesting names as the other teams. It's a lot of veteran aging pitchers like Alex Cobb and Carlos Carrasco. But looking at Cleveland, there's two clear guys that I would be interested in. It just depends if you want to go with that high risk, high reward, or go someone with a little bit more of a safer floor. That is Shane Bieber or Matt Boyd. Because Shane Bieber, the last couple of years, really the last few years, right? This is a guy that always seems to be hurt, never seems to pitch, but we all know when Shane Bieber is healthy and on, Shane Bieber is one of the best pitchers in the sport. The only issue is it seems like he's never around to pitch. Shane Bieber is consistently always hurt, and it's sad to see because I'm usually the guy that's drafting Shane Bieber in fantasy and getting stuck with him. Back in 2022, made 31 starts, was fantastic. But you look at 3 of his last 4 years and a lot of games missed, a lot of innings pitched that didn't happen. And Shane Bieber, I think, is an absolute stud. So if you're telling me he's fully healthy and we get that guy, the Triple Crown Cy Young Award winner, Shane Bieber, like, yeah, that's a dude you put with Gallen, Kelly, Fott, and now you have the best 1 through 4 in Major League Baseball. But I also think his health is a major question mark. That's why if you went Matt Boyd, I don't think that would be bad at all. He could be your perfect number 5 starter in your rotation if you want to move Ryan Nelson to the bullpen. And let's say, hypothetically, Jordan Montgomery does not pick up his option. Matthew Boyd could be your perfect number 5 starter. And if Erod has another bad year, Matthew Boyd could be just fine for you as your number 4 starter as well. He's been a little bit up and down as a starter throughout his career, but as a reliever the last few years, well, not really as a reliever, more as a starter the last few years, he has been pretty solid 3 of the last 4 seasons. 2023, he was pretty bad, but this past season, 2.7 ERA and 8 starts. In 2022, he was mostly a reliever. That was kind of the season that I was slightly referencing just now. Hit a 1.35 ERA and 13 innings pitched. So I think Matthew Boyd, when looking at his last few years, he's probably like that Nick Martinez type, like that Bryce Jarvis. Maybe some days he starts, maybe some days he comes out the pen, but long reliever, spot starter for you. Maybe your number 5 starter if you want him to be that, or maybe that long reliever for you out the pen. But either way, I think Matthew Boyd could be a good play for the D-backs if they want to go in that direction. But I think here I would actually go with the more upside play, just because if it's Matthew Boyd or Shane Bieber, just give me the high risk, high reward, and the potential Cy Young candidate in Shane Bieber. And then looking at the New York Yankees, who would I want from this team? Again, this one actually has a lot of options because You could bring back a former friend in Luke Weaver, who has a club option that the Yankees are definitely going to pick up for $2.5 million. Insane. Luke Weaver has turned into a premier reliever in baseball. Verdugo is going to be out there as an outfielder. Gleyber Torres, if you wanted another infielder, he's got some power, maybe a DH. Kind of interesting. Clay Holmes, maybe you want to rediscover him or one of their other relievers that they have. They got some interesting options, but I think if he opts out, your two options are going to be Garrett Cole with the opt out or Juan Soto. And for me, I think it's an easy decision. As cool as it would be to add Garrett Cole, he's going to be 34 years old. And for me, it would have to be like a 2-year deal for adding Garrett Cole. I think the idea of having Juan Soto and Corbin Carroll in the same outfield for the next decade would be so much more fun. And so if I had to pick a player off each championship team, imagine if we added Blake Trinian to our bullpen. Imagine if we had Pete Alonso now as our first baseman. I mean, I think I would still rather have Christian Walker, but just imagine just from when you open up the lineup and now all of a sudden Pete Alonso's batting cleanup for the Dbacks. Imagine you had Shane Bieber as your number 5 starter, coming back off injury. It's like, man, if this guy ends up hitting his ceiling once again, that is a frontline starter for the Dbacks. And then imagine Juan Soto, Corbin Carroll, Lourdes Gurriel, and Jake McCarthy as your quad in the outfield. Absolutely insane. Maybe at that point, you just go like Lourdes Gurriel full-time DH or Jake McCarthy full-time DH, and then maybe you don't have to sign a DH at that point if you go out there and get a Juan Soto. But for this hypothetical exercise, I thought that would be very interesting if the D-backs stole a free agent off each one of those championship series teams. And for me, Trinian, Soto, Bieber, and Pete Alonso would be the 4 that I would steal off those 4 teams. And now I want to talk to you guys about Corbin Carroll and the 2024 season he just had and what he needs to do to be better in 2025. And if you want to buy tickets to an upcoming sporting event, then the best place to do that, of course, is going to be GameTime, because GameTime is the best place for last-minute tickets to sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. GameTime has flash deals which save you even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or event. They have zone deals which save you even more when you choose a section and you let GameTime choose the seats. They even have this feature called all-in pricing. When you toggle that feature on, you can see the total cost up front with no surprise fees at checkout. Even get a panoramic view from your seat before you buy. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets and more with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account or redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right. Let's get back to the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. And now let's do our Corbin Carroll player review. As we're doing all off season, we're going to take one player a day until we run out of guys, or at least guys I'm interested in talking about, and just breaking down their 2024 season, strengths and weaknesses, and then setting up goals and expectations for 2025. And today I want to talk about Corbin Carroll, because Carroll definitely had an up and down season where the first half saw Corbin Carroll look like one of the worst players in Major League Baseball. We talk about Eugenio all the time, and if you just split his season straight down the middle, it was one of the 3 worst players in that first half and one of the 3 best players in the second half. Well, for Corbin Carroll, it was close, maybe not as drastic. He was maybe one of the 10 worst players in the first half, and then maybe one of the 15 best players in the second half of the season, but still went from being one of the worst to one of the best. And we have to figure out why that happened. Well, we have done podcasts during the season to figure out why that happened, because Carroll was driving the ball into the ground. He was not, really flat swing, the type of pitches he was attacking. Like in the second half of the season, he was more selective on the type of pitches, like anything that was more middle, upper in the zone he wanted to attack, the angle at which he attacked those pitches as well. Like he was just more intentional in the second half of the season as opposed to the first half. And I really think the way he ended the second half of the season, it's going to set up for a big 2025 for Corbin Carroll, because some of the things that he did really well in 2024, the first thing I want to discuss, he was a killer at Chase Field. When looking at the numbers, it was pretty night and day, his impact at home versus on the road. I mean, 856 OPS at home, 654 OPS on the road. Literally a 200-point difference from Corbin Carroll, which is a pretty sizable mark. Like, that's a very big drop off. And considering he played 79 games at home and 79 games on the road, that is a little bit concerning to see such a wide gap. Another thing that was pretty weird, Corbin Carroll, he was a killer this past season in right field. 886 OPS when he was a right fielder, 18 home runs as well, and 285 at bats. But when he played center field for some reason, the offense fell off a cliff. 612 OPS, 3 home runs, and 299 at bats. So he actually had more at bats playing center as opposed to right field, but 15 less home runs. Like, the amount of production and power when he's batting or when he's in right field as opposed to center field, I don't know about the psyche or why that is, but for some reason, he hits way better in right field as opposed to center field. And I think in the second half of the season, we saw Jake McCarthy take over center field, right? A little bit more than Corbin Carroll. And I think we saw Corbin Carroll's offense take off, become better because of it. For some reason, Carroll's offense just seems to perform better when he's in right as opposed to when he's in center field. Base running, still a strength for Corbin Carroll. 96 percentile in sprint speed. Base running value, 100 percentile. Still had a ton of steals on the season. Like, that's always going to be one of his biggest strengths. 35 stolen bases this past year, and felt like he didn't steal enough. Felt like it was a down year. If you're actually looking at sprint speed, something that's kind of fun. Fun fact, Corbin Carroll is not the fastest player on the Dbacks. Jake McCarthy, according to sprint speed, is the fastest player in Arizona. I don't think anyone would have expected that entering the year, but maybe we need to get a foot race for those two guys. And maybe we got to broach the topic like next spring training, get something going and ask them if they've done a race anytime soon, because Corbin Carroll has always been considered the quicker player. You look at sprint speed, always considered faster, but you look at StatCast recently and Jake McCarthy has caught Corbin Carroll. So I would love to ask them if they ever do a race in the offseason or during spring training. And then Corbin Carroll, the last strength I want to discuss from the 2024 season was what he was able to do against off-speed pitches this past year. 560 slugging against the off-speed. He crushed off-speed pitches. That is one of those pitches where, when talking about being more intentional and waiting for your perfect pitch, he definitely did that with the off-speed and crushed it at a high level. And so that was another strength I wanted to discuss. His ability at home, his ability in right field, his ability, I forgot to discuss, in late game situations. For some reason, we'll discuss in a second his weaknesses, because his overall clutch ability is not that good. But when it's a late game clutch situation, that's when Corbin Carroll steps up, because if it's past the 7th inning and within a couple runs, Corbin Carroll dominates. Late in close situations, he has an 891 OPS. And innings 7 through 9, he has an 876 OPS. So Corbin Carroll is great late in the game, but overall clutch situations can't say the same, because one of his weaknesses, runners in scoring position, 205 average this past year. Just not good enough if you're Corbin Carroll. And like I said, he did not hit on the road. He did not hit in center field, did not hit in clutch situations. And also breaking balls, he needs to get better against that. Sub 200 average, sub 370 slug, like, just not good enough for how good Corbin Carroll is against those type of pitches. And so when you're talking about goals and expectations for Carroll for 2025, I think the biggest ones, I think the biggest one, of course, is can he just replicate what he did in 2023, where he was truly one of the faces of baseball, one of the best players in the sport, MVP candidate. Like, all we need him to do is just get back to the level he was as a rookie. It's insane to say, but his rookie season was so good. It was a rookie season good enough where it could quite literally be the best season of his career. Because for a lot of guys, it would have been the best season of their career. It just happened to come as a rookie season. So for Carroll, just get back to the level that you were your rookie season. And that's literally all we need from you going forward. That's it for this edition of the Locked on Diamondbacks podcast. Come back tomorrow for more Diamondbacks news coverage and insight. We'll have another player review, of course. And tomorrow we got Jake the Rake McCarthy on the men. So be on the lookout for that. And as always, stay safe, stay healthy. Deuces.